Good evening. Today we're talking about style. Style in more of a sense of identity. I want to compare the idea of what is authentic to individuals, what makes them unique, in tandem or in contrast with what is trendy, what is the identity that we're told that we should have, right? And there's two sides of that, right? There's your own individual persona, and then you have kind of this capitalistic perspective of your identity is defined by what is marketable, what is trending, what is, I guess, making business money, and how that becomes the norm for people. And then that contests with individualistic identities because you end up having this idea where it's like you're being told you should be like this, it's making companies money. And because it's making companies money, or the fact that it is making money, means that a lot of people are following through on that trend or diving into that, jumping on that bandwagon. And so if they're jumping on that bandwagon and that's considered style, that's considered individualism, but it can't be individualistic because everyone's doing it. So on the other side, you want to have this idea of identity, but personal identity is contested with kind of herd mentality, but it's being packaged and sold as individualism. So I want to contrast that idea and look at it in terms of style and fashion from the first kind of upfront, but we can use that as a catalyst to dive deeper into the fact that we can view our individualistic perspectives, view our persona, our identity as something that may be contested by what the rest of the world may be buying into versus what we want to be, and how it may be this kind of fine line in defining a story for ourselves that doesn't play too much on either side of going completely your own way and being completely out of pocket, as well as being completely in pocket and never having a true personal identity. To find an answer between those two, we can dive into, like I mentioned, style. So let's go into the first topic of persona. And persona is really the differentiating factor between who really puts a lot of emphasis and energy into their style versus a person who just doesn't really care, right? They don't really care about how people see them on their style. They're both focused on how people view them based on who they are rather than that first impression. Obviously, I have a contention with that, but that's a separate topic about why there's an importance of style. But today we're questioning what is style. And so when it comes to persona, I think the thing that we go down to is when we look at someone, we're saying, okay, they're wearing, for example, athleisure. You form a association, right? An archetype, and you say this person is of that, this person is this. And then for the people dressing themselves, right? You dress yourself and you say, okay, I want to fit into this category, that category. I don't think it's always conscious for people, but it is subconscious for the majority, right? You fit yourself into a certain archetype when you base your style around a, for example, music genre or a lifestyle or a person, right? And a celebrity. So you have, for example, streetwear, right? And that could have either like an kind of a leaning towards, are you not really caring about the way you look? You want to look a bit drabby. You want to have that questionable being like, is this person like really a contributing member to society, or are they just kind of living life by the wayside? Or are they on the other side being kind of very out there with their style and more kind of like a rapper, hip hop kind of fit, right? The baggy jeans, the hoodie or the chain and all that stuff, right? Or like the ripped distressed jeans. Are you wearing tight clothes like a rock star kind of thing, right? And you could get into those different type of archetypes based on the association. But I think in there, it kind of comes down to this point of who are you trying to be? And a lot of people who try and be someone don't necessarily have a uniqueness to them, right? So you can clearly tell that if someone's wearing baggy clothes and it has a certain kind of colorway, right? Like denim on denim baggy fits into a certain kind of like 90s hip hop kind of style, right? And I think there is validity in that, right? There's validity in fitting into a certain era, a certain type, and that's what you want to associate to, and that's the persona you want to give off. However, there is another level to that where you kind of go deeper, I think, into individualism and the things that you take between all forms of style, right? And so, yes, it's obvious that there are characteristics of style that we can see in their personas that we can associate ourselves to, and we can kind of convey this aura of who we want to be. However, we do also face this issue of, is there such thing as uniqueness in our style? And is our style intrinsic to us, right? Does our style really mean something that is identifiable to us, or are we just going to be categorized and boxed? And that is a question that I'm kind of curious about, is do we have a sense of style that tells a story about who we are, or are we telling a person that our persona is this because we want to be viewed as a certain type of person? And I think the answer to that really comes down to how in line is your identity to the person that you're trying to be through your clothing. And with that, how much can you fit between the lines? And I think there's a distinct correlation between who you are based on what you wear and what someone may interpret of you if they learn about your personality. So if you're someone who's very hyper analytical and they can focus in on different things you say and analyze you, they can see that there's depth to your character. Everyone has depth to their character, but they can form a blueprint of who you are. The same thing applies to fashion, where it's like everyone's fashion can be unique, but you can also fall into the wayside. And I think there's a lot of problems that people run into when they're trying to develop their character along with fashion is they become a copy of another person. And so if you try and stay away from that, you try and develop your own persona, it becomes this complicated endeavor of trying to find uniqueness in what you're wearing while still staying away from what everyone else is wearing, not fitting into an archetype. So to kind of summarize that, clearly we want to be this, have this, convey this persona. We fit into an archetype, but we become kind of this copycat of like what other people are wearing. So there's no uniqueness, there's no individuality. The whole sense of style is to have this individual kind of aura around you saying this is who this person is, this is who that person is, even if you are down a similar category. But there's so much repetition in style and fashion now in terms of lack of, I would say, distinctness within categories that only a trained eye can notice. And the trained eye is like 0.001% of the population. Like most people won't even figure out what that distinction is. It's just arbitrary numbers. This is a stat, but it's like that, right? Most people won't notice it. And so you want to become someone who is unique with what they wear. However, you don't want to fit into a kind of structure that's defined. So that becomes very complicated, right? Then it becomes a question of like, is style really just conveying an archetype or just being a person in a category, or is style unique to who we want to be and what we want to say about ourselves? And so I think that ties into the next topic where we're going to go into how that might all get swayed based on markets and the market of fashion and style and consumerism. So when we look at capitalism, there's two perspectives that I want to look at. One, I want to look at the idea of trends, and then the idea of packaging up what we're being sold. So when you look at the idea of trends, everything kind of follows in this cycle of what is in, what is out, and you view it as something that has a lot of artistic nature to it, a lot of uniqueness to it. However, when it becomes a trend, it becomes a bandwagon also, and a lot of people find themselves jumping on that, and that becomes identity. And the pitfall with that is with trends, your identity changes with the wind, right? One season it could be oversized coats, the next season it can be slim fit, the next season can be continental. You don't really know what's coming next. And with that, we kind of see that things keep changing. And as I look in this trend, I look at this timeline, right? We can see how over time things just follow this line, and you can either fit inside the category or outside the category. However, the problem with that is that we end up seeing this situation where we're told that this is unique, we're told that this is authentic to us, we're told that this is distinct. However, if you look at it and you say that's unique to me and everyone else says that, then you end up in a situation where you're not really unique anymore because it's a trend, right? It's just like wearing a common outfit that everyone wears. It's a uniform again. So then it begs the question of, is your personal identity, is your persona truly your persona, or is it really just a trend, a fad? And that kind of ties into this idea where if you're following what's being marketed to you, are you still unique? If you are following towards this capitalistic market that we're in, are we individuals anymore, or are we now just part of a herd? And does that change the way we have our own identity? Does that change the way we form our identity? And that can touch onto anything, right? That can be the sports you play, the activities you do, what you read, how you go about your day, what you find interesting. And that kind of brings it all together to say, are we true individuals, or are we just following what we're being sold is individualistic? So then the question forms, how do we form a true identity when all that is around us is influenced by this idea of a capitalistic market? What can we do? now we tie it together, right? We have on one side the persona, the individual identity that we want to create. Then we have the ruse of individual identity created through this package of capitalism, right? This idea that more is better and you need to keep changing with the times and improving and spending more, really just for a market economy. And as much as we enjoy capitalism, we also have to be cognizant of the downfalls of it. In a capitalistic free open market, you have the wolves and you have the sheep, you have the herd mentality, and you have the kind of lone wolf seller mentality. And with that, you can see now we have this kind of perspective change where it's how much effort do you want to put into forming your own distinct identity that will put you on that almost lone wolf path. However, it does pedestalize you almost. It does make you someone who is praised. So the thing is, you're not going to be, I would say, alone as a lone wolf. Like, you have this own distinct identity that is kind of praised because people look at it and say, oh, I wish I was like that, or I want to be like that. And that's what creates trends. You have people viewing Kanye, viewing the high fashion brands and saying, I want to look like that, I want to dress like that for whatever reason, right? And so now you kind of bring that together and we have this almost a story formed, right? Each one of these trendsetters, each one of these individuals who define what others wear have a story to them. They have an evolution that they follow where you start off with kind of the roots, the beginning, the trends that they followed from other people, and then they formulate their own style. They formulate their own, I would say, catalyst that shoots them into their own space. And I think every person who wants to be stylish, who wants to have a unique personality, who wants to be their own person, should go down that path where you have this shift in mindset of not saying I'm going to fight the trends, I'm not going to be kind of fighting the capitalistic market. And the real idea is to create your own story, your own individual trend, and what works the best actually in any space, whether that's your identity, whether that's business, whether that's style and fashion, is to take the market, learn from what it can teach you about trends, about perspectives, about all of that, adapt what you have developed from what you're being told to wear, what you're being told to think and all that, and then develop your own ideas, develop your own style, develop your own creativity to be an interesting individual for yourself, to derive fruit out of this world more than what's being given to you. When you follow the trends, follow the herd, you end up giving out more from yourself and getting less in return. And so you just become a number, you just become a person, and your life is fruitless. Your life is not interesting anymore because you're just like everybody else. But to create that intrigue, create that excitement, you really have to define your own trend, define your own creativity. That comes by writing your story, that comes from seeing what's out there, learning, going down those paths in your youth and following those trends initially for the whole sole purpose of getting away from that. And that's a metaphor about everything in life. And it ties it all together to say, when I answer the question, what is style for myself, it really comes down to what is the story I'm trying to tell of my identity. And as I define my own identity, as you define your own identity, your style should reflect really the distinct nature that you have, right? I'm going to be similar in some cases with other people. For example, suit is similar in many categories, but you're not necessarily going to be the exact same with a crisp white shirt and a bow tie, or you're not always going to, a black tie. I don't know why I said bow tie. No one's wearing bow ties these days unless it's a black tie event. But yeah, you get the idea, right? It's not going to be this exact same thing that you see on a mannequin or whatnot. It's going to be crossovers, changes, ways of wearing them. Not to say that what I have is a final kind of put together, but it's definitely a metaphor to say that you're taking pieces because you're not always going to have the ability to be completely unique, because you're always going to be influenced by outside ideas. But the more you take those outside ideas and use them as creative fuel to form your own identity, the better you become. So I did start this off with saying a style would be the catalyst, but it's really a metaphor for life. It's really a metaphor for how you go about creating your own identity and deriving fruit from the world and life that we have. How would you make the most of it? And I think that all comes down to getting away from the herd, learning from being in the herd. You're born into the herd, you learn from being in the herd, and then taking yourself out and defining your own path to be the most interesting person that you can be for yourself and for the world around you, to push the envelope of excitement, right? You would have never had rock and roll if those teenagers didn't just become rebellious. You would never have, Steve Jobs if he didn't rebel and do all the cool stuff that he did. You wouldn't have any of the innovations that we have now if they didn't just define their own path and define their identity by just going down this direction of doing extremes, right? And yes, you obviously have like technology and innovation associated to that, but there's so much more in terms of culture that comes from taking what already exists and completely transforming it into something that's unique to you. So with that being said, when you ask what is style, I will say it is your story, or it is your duplicate of someone else. Go with that and ruminate. Till next time, good night.